So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay. Today we are going to be on Osgiliath, but not the ruined husk of Osgiliath that we often see, but the rebuilt version of Osgiliath. So this is going to be a little bit easier potentially for the defenders to try and hold on to. Sort of ruined Osgiliath is quite a challenging map to defend because the lack of walls around the outer edge in particular mean that the attackers can often use their skirmishers to very good effect and slowly wear the already outnumbered defenders down. That's not going to be quite so easy for them to do this time though. The large wall around the outside of Osgiliath stands strong still, and of course across the river this is obviously still quite a dangerous area for the attackers to try and funnel into. Interestingly enough though, we've actually got the same alliance on the defence as we had last time, and that's not due to any sort of continuation of that battle, because it's going to be Gondor, Umbar and Numenor on the defence, which is quite interesting. It's again, like, they're not connected, these two battles, by any means, but it is quite a scary alliance, to be honest with you. Numenor with their good child and their evil child, because there's a lot of infantry power here, there's a lot of skirmish power, just a lot of quality overall, as well as a lot of good holding power. So it's going to be interesting to see how they get on defending this area, because previously, of course, it was a very close battle, but it was out in the wilderness, not quite as much cover, but there was a very nice position for them to hold on to in Osgiliath. If the attackers can break through the outer defences and start rampaging through the streets, it can be a little bit difficult to sort of reverse that tide. But we're going to go through the attackers first of all, and I assume the Numenorians here have earned the ire of all of the rest of the free peoples of Middle-earth, because there are no evil factions to be seen on display today. It's going to be the Numenorians on the defence, and a combination of men and elves trying to bring them down, starting off with Jev and me, who's going to be playing as Dale. Dale as a faction are kind of an interesting one. They've got as a play style, I'm not really sure what to make of Dale. I mean, they're really dominant in most skirmish fights they go into, but from an infantry point of view, while their infantry is good, it doesn't tend to reach the same heights as the other Western kingdoms. Like compared to Gondor, for example, they're a little bit better in a skirmish fight, but their infantry is noticeably worse for the most part. The Dalian Spearmen, though, are decent. They've got a decent amount of holding power, obviously nice to hold the line together. Swordmasters of Esgaroth with the armour upgrade now, so obviously they're a little bit tankier than they once were. Swordmaster units in general as well are a little bit more efficient in the current patch of the game, so they should be good for clearing walls with their large two-handed swords, which are a little bit more Dalian in style now as well. Over here we have the dismounted Earls of Dale, one of the strong points of the Dalian infantry force, because of course they are a higher end line infantry unit. Very nice armour, good in melee, obviously difficult to kill off without armour piercing as well, because of that thick armour they have, which they presumably get from their close proximity with the dwarves, both through learning and through trade. So yeah, I mean the shield value is not quite as good on these lads as it is on some of the other line infantry units of a similar size, or similar cost I should say. But the armour kind of makes up for that anyway. So yeah, I mean they kind of maybe are a little bit overlooked next to stuff like the Alcarondas Legion and the like, but they are pretty darn good, and in this situation that shouldn't be any different. Some civilians just pushing up the ram, obviously. We've got some more Swordmasters of Esgaroth. The other frontline unit in combination with the Earls of Dale, which you often see, are these guys, the Barding Herd, the Halberdiers with their big bardiches. So an armour-piercing phalanx. What they have going for them as well is the fact that they have a slight shield value, and obviously that thick armour that the upper tier Dalian infantry is known for, which gives them that extra staying power, which will obviously buy time for stuff like their archers to do the business. Lake Town Pikemen, a cheap unit of pikes. Obviously their armour is not quite as good, being from Lake Town, but the phalanx is still very useful. Black shots, so the Dragon Slayers, the armour-piercing missiles from the black arrows from their handheld wind lances, obviously going to be very useful for cracking through the armour of all the Numenorian defenders. Interesting to see a unit of melee cavalry here, the Earls of Dale, so Jev was clearly thinking ahead. If there was a sally out from any of the defenders, which there could be, all three of them have got access to some pretty nasty lancers. In particular, obviously, the Knights from Umbar would be something you don't want to see charging towards you. Something to help break that charge and do some damage to them in melee will be appreciated, of course. So some good forethought there. Whether they have it or not, I mean, you can still use them in the later stages of the game to rampage through the streets, as I said. Some Lake Town infantry, light infantry, archer, hybrids there, and a lot of Dalian bowmen, unsurprisingly. Dale going in for a decent skirmish line, but actually for the most part they've dipped more into their infantry, which in a siege like this, considering it's the rebuilt version of Osgiliath, I think is the right call. Then we have awesome Boss Death, who's going to be playing as Dorwinion. He's got a couple of units of Morroquendi bows, heavy elven archers, or heavier elven archers. Their armour is still not going to be quite up to the task of skirmishing, especially with the likes of Gondor and Umbar. But poison arrows, a bit of an anti-cavalry bonus in melee as well to prevent them from being an easy, soft target to charge into for cavalry. Decent, I think, at dealing damage, as the I think in the later stages of the battle again, they could prove to be a little bit more effective, because then when the defenders start to flag a little bit, you could break them off and send them back to the town centre, which could be very useful. Early on though, they do run the risk of being out-skirmished by the heavier human archers they face. But Dorwinion also have heavy units of their own, the Elvelyn, the Vanguard, with some really nice armour. Their spears, they're not very damaging, but they are very tough to kill off, especially without any armour piercing. Elvelyn infantry, so they're a little bit better in melee against other infantry, but still primarily a defensive focused unit. Quite a fair few of them there behind the siege tower. Another unit of the Vanguard, and then back over here I'd assume we have the two bodyguards here units. So yeah, the Morroquendi Glade Masters, which are of course the Elven Glavemen, which have the anti-cavalry bonus, the armour piercing, really strong generally speaking. They're a little bit fragile if you can wear off their hit points and hit them with arrows, as most units of this type are, but in melee they're incredibly damaging. And then you have the armour piercing unit. You have the Elvelyn Hammer Guard, which this is the new unit model for them, which is the first time I've showcased them, but they have been seen previously on other channels before, up till this point of course. They look really good, I have to say. I think this is definitely an improvement for them. It definitely sets them apart from the Tharbad Warhammers, which they effectively shared a unit model with before. And they've also changed from being a shock infantry bodyguard unit to being a shielded armour piercing bodyguard unit, which are actually fairly rare in the game. Like the Helm's Hammers are one, that kind of unit, and I think it fits Dorwinion as well, so a really, really tough unit this. And the armour piercing is going to be very useful against all of the defenders, of course. Then back over here we have Infinity 7, who's going to be playing as Mirkwood today. Now Mirkwood, a very strong faction, but if there is one area in which they maybe slightly struggle, it's being on the attack in a siege, because they don't have the most robust armour, and nor are they capable of bringing sort of numbers-focused armies that are going to be good in this sort of situation. It all depends on how you use them. I think if you brainlessly charge forward with Mirkwood in a siege like this, you're asking for trouble. If you play more of a supporting role until the late game, however, I think Mirkwood can really shine. Hiri Lung and Ents, so obviously the Ents really good damage dealers. Effectively they can play the role of trolls and be line breakers. We've got the Hiri Ak as well, so higher tier units generally speaking. Hiri Peng. We've got some Woodland Realm Axemen as well, so they're the dual wielders, obviously slightly cheaper, but still the lack of a shield and rather thin armour makes them good targets for archers and the like. And then back over here we have more Hiri Auth, so and a catapult actually, and some Spears of Emondweir, but mostly the upper tier Elven units over here for Mirkwood, which again, even more sort of makes the point that they should be playing more of a supporting role, maybe waiting a little bit more to the late game. Arthedain over here, played by Hrothgar Havenlight, or Heavenlight I should say. Arthedain clearly weren't invited to the Numenorian rebellion party, because they are marching alongside men and elves to try and bring Numenor and their children to heel. We've got some Arthedain men-at-arms fully upgraded, so they're going to be pretty good at being in the first wave, because they're not very damaging, but they are capable of taking a real beating when they've got their full plate armour, and as long as you support them quickly so they don't get wiped out, they can definitely be a good first line in. Arthedain pikemen without the armour upgrade, so with most cheap pikes, or cheaper pikes like this, of course, the key is just making sure they don't get shot up on the approach. Warns of the North, Dismounted Knights of Numenor and Dunedain Peacekeepers, so the Warns of the North, again another armour-piercing archer that's really strong in melee with their two-handed longsword. We've got the Dismounted Knights of Numenor, which of course are very, very tough to bring down, obviously very tanky indeed. And the Dunedain Peacekeepers, of course, with that axe have got a slightly higher attack value than a line infantry unit of this cost would normally have. Evendim Spearmen, of course, are fully upgraded now, are like that, so you can upgrade them to be pretty damn useful. I mean, they are still militia spears. I do think that this kind of is maybe a little bit misleading. It's a bit like the Easterron Clansmen when you upgrade them to look very similar to the Flag Rim. Like, they are ultimately still a militia unit. You may pack on the armour, but their performance in melee maybe isn't going to be on the mid-tier level that you expect it to be looking at this unit model. So do bear that in mind. I mean, it still makes them more useful because it means that they're capable of taking more of a beating, but just be careful with what you expect from them. Arthedain men-at-arms there, Evendim archers, who of course also have an armour upgrade now, so they've got this sort of American football style shoulder pads on, which makes them a little bit more resilient in a skirmish fight, which should be quite useful if they can get into a good position. And some Arthedain marksmen, a lot of stakes on the front line here. And then finally, we have a unit, an army that's going to be mostly hidden, the Hobbit folk, played by Steward of Dale, so he's got some battling brandy bucks here for some cheap AP. Proudfoot protectors, which are a must in any Hobbit army because crossbows combined with pikes are just a real menace to try and deal with. Ents and Bjornings as well are pretty much going to be the same sort of thing. Just having a look around, I do not believe they are here but maybe they can hide. I kind of doubt it, considering the kind of unit they are, but I haven't seen them as of yet in the game. But it doesn't look like we're going to be seeing the Eagles today, which is kind of understandable, because they are effectively Lancers, and in a situation like this, they're not going to be that useful, to be honest with you. They can't just fly over the river after all. That doesn't, Medieval 2 will not allow it. Now, however, looking at the defenders, so we have the Camping Panda, who sent me this battle replay, so big thank you to him. Playing as Umbar, he's got some Alcarondas Legion, so we're going to know what the sort of thing that the defenders are going to bring here. Corsair Crossbowmen, a Dunaim Shield Guard over on this side, as well as some, I think those are some Naru and Aru Sentinels, indeed they are. Some Naru and Aru Royal Guard on the walls, some more Alcarondas Legion, even more Alcarondas Legion. Corsair Blackguards over here, Fencers and Crossbowmen. And there's some more units back here as well. Rangers, unsurprising for the defenders. Balakith Shield Bearers, who have the armour upgrade, so obviously those Macemen are going to be quite useful at cracking through the armour of Dorwinion and Dale, who are over on this side of the river. As are the Balakith Axe Guard, even more so perhaps with their higher attack values, but obviously a little bit less versatile than the shielded Shield Bearers. Back over here in the town centre we can see Beastie COTF, who's going to be playing as Numenor. He's got some Sentinels, some Royal Guard as well. Royal Legion of Armenelos. 2 units of Pharazim Swordmasters, I believe this is. So that's a big investment. I mean, I can see why you'd maybe want to do that with 3 hit points. I think it's a bit of a mistake, personally. Numenor are already a really expensive army without dipping into the red limit on an extravagance like that. Harbingers of Castamere also back in the town centre. Over here, some more Corsair Blackguards, some more Fencers. The Gondorians here, played by Y2K86. He's got some Raven Helms, some Citadel Guardsmen, as well as some Athelian Rangers. Axemen of the Sarnak are over here. Belagaya Footmen from Numenor. Guards of Osgiliath and Fountain Guard. Gondor Archers, Citadel Guard. Obviously, the cost of all of these high-tier units not such a problem when you're the defenders and you've got a little bit more money. Trebuchet, Fountain Guard, more Seafarers. Got some Veterans of Osgiliath in there as well, who have the first level of armour upgrade at least. Raven Helms, Axemen, Fountain Guard, Balagaya Footmen, Guards, Gondor Archers. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the Gondorians are over here on the front. Numenorian Cohort for the Numenorian Line Infantry, as well as some Shield Guard for the armour-piercing spears, much like the Citadel Guard are. Balagaya Footmen, Pikes, Cohort, more Cohorts, Seafarers, and then back over there some Pikes. I may have missed a couple of things, including a unit over there, the Shield Guard, but that will become apparent as the battle plays out. So without further ado, let's begin. So, Osgiliath rebuilt. Definitely easier to defend than the ruined version, as I said, but still challenging because of the size of it. Generally speaking, larger settlements like this are going to be more challenging to hold just because there's more that you have to defend. If you can condense your defence a little bit more, then it's going to be easier. Like from the front here, there's only so many choke points and ways that the attackers can funnel in, which is going to be to the defenders' help, but always on Osgiliath, the thing that I'm really looking at to decide the fight is the outer fight over here on this side of the river against these walls, whether they're still standing or whether they're the crumbled version in ruined Osgiliath. And it's going to be interesting to see how both Dorwinion and Dale handle this, because it's all going to be about timing, I think. I think Dale and Dorwinion do need to put some early pressure on, but I wouldn't charge forward with everything I had. I'd maybe just try and skirmish even on this version of the map, to be honest. Try and do a little bit of damage here and there with some cheaper archers, and wait until the assault here from the front is truly underway, because if you can do that, then more resources will inevitably have to come over here. Having said that, the Hobbits and Mirkwood, it'll be interesting to see how these armies sort of handle themselves. So all the Hobbits revealing themselves, Hobbitry in arms, Tukish Hunters. There's also some Dunedain Rangers in there as well, so some attacking Rangers, more Hunters, some Farmers of Buckland, which are of course just effectively the more damaging variant. You can see the Bjornings really causing a bit of a problem among the ranks of their own army here, getting in the way, knocking them over. They will of course all get back up, but yeah, I suppose a rampaging bear doesn't really have much subtlety about it now, does it? Here comes the Alvalan infantry. So the siege tower's moving forward, so it does look as though, I mean, it's not often I say being heavily cautious is the right way to go about things, but it would be on this occasion, I think. There is the chance maybe that Dorwinion and Dale could do something in melee here to seize the outer walls, but I somewhat doubt it. Both Dorwinion and Dale in melee anyway are two factions which primarily thrive on how defensive and how they can outlast the enemy. That's not really going to help them too much against Numenor and Umbar, who are really infantry powerhouses that are going to be capable of dealing that damage. Ooh, hello. The Trebuchet already firing away, hitting the Bjornings actually, getting some slight kills on the men-at-arms as well, but a bit of a shame there for Steward of Dale, losing 4 or 5 even Bjornings. I think that is just 4, but Bjorning's one of those few units the Hobbits can have which are genuinely high tier. The question of whether cavalry is actually going to be worthwhile is worth considering as well, but we shall see. Gondor archers heading back in the walls, hoping maybe to get a few volleys off as the enemies cross the river, but Steward of Dale on top of that, he's going to send forward his fast-moving, more monstrous units first and foremost to force them back behind the safety of their gates. Of course, getting rangers in this sort of position as well can be especially devastating, as we've seen in the past on Osgiliath. I do prefer this version of Osgiliath, to be honest with you, where it's the river crossing, rather than the one that funnels you across a single bridge, because that, on that map, the defenders definitely have the edge, because that is such a narrow choke point, and rangers decide that battle 9 times out of 10, to be honest with you. Here we go, though. Dorwinion. Are they going to climb the towers immediately? I don't think they are, actually, which I think is the right thing to do. I mean, they are stood right in the view of all of these arrow towers, which is not ideal, but Dorwinion's armour is such that they don't have to worry too much about that, perhaps. Oh, Mirkwood Stalkers revealing themselves as well, so they do have a bit of cavalry also, but there's no danger of a sally out here, which means the Dorwinion and Dalian cavalry is not likely to be too impactful in this battle. Meanwhile, civilians going forward, just knocking down the gate. So I do like this actually. They're not charging forward with everything just yet. They're waiting for their allies to make something happen over on this side of the field, I would imagine. However, Gondor getting into position here on the walls with their archers, just basic Gondor archers, so nothing overly scary. And most of the units that have crossed the river are going to be archers, which are not going to mind being in a skirmish fight at all, and basic units of line infantry with their shields, and it's generally the sort of thing. Absorbing ammunition is definitely going to be the sort of thing that they won't mind too much in engaging in. So here go the Abendim archers. They're going to be firing over the walls. Obviously these volleys are not going to do too much in the way of damage, to be honest with you, and you can see as well that in a militia archer, I'm not even sure what they're targeting. I'd imagine it's going to be one of these units back here, maybe the Axemen. But you can see how inaccurate the militia archers are. Oof. Dale breaching the gates there. As you see as well that the wall taking damage. That's interesting. Has this map been changed by any chance? I know in the past you couldn't knock down this wall and march through it, but now that it's classified as a wall, I think technically you can, which would be interesting to behold. Keldon River Patrol revealing themselves here. Dorwinion still awaiting the signal to climb onto the walls, and this could be a case of some really good interplay here from the attackers. If Dale and Dorwinion coordinate their assaults to get up onto the walls at the same time, if the attackers start pressurising the front, knocking down this wall over here, at the very least it will destroy the building here and the men that are on it. Even if they can't pass through, they could deny Gondor the useful position there, which would definitely be good for them. You can see also a large force now crossing the river from Arthedain and the Shire. I mean, there's nothing too cunning about a siege tower when you think about it. I mean, it slowly trundles towards you. It's not going to catch you off guard by any means. Dorwinion now also breaking through one of the outer gates. The calm before the storm, really, this. You can see here the civilians still taking damage. What have we got going on over here? Alcarondas Legion. They are actually climbing up onto the walls to attack it immediately, Dale. Earls of Dale are actually pretty decent opponents for the Alcarondas Legion. The problem is, the unit which has its fixed position on the wall is obviously going to start off with an advantage, and that should snowball into a clear victory for the Alcarondas Legion, even if they're a similar tier of unit to one another. No real pressure coming from any ranged units thus far. Naruna Aru Royal Guard are there. And there you can see the first melee engagements that we perceive in this battle are going to be between the Earls and the Alcarondas Legion, but the Alcarondas Legion have got the benefit of position. So yeah, they can go through there now. That's interesting. That's never been the case in the past, I don't believe. But the Earls here, so the Alcarondas Legion and the Arrow Towers are going to be there as well, helping out. But Dale attacking. They need to hope, Dale, that their allies are also engaging in the same sort of thing on the other side, and unfortunately they're not really doing that. In fact, Numenor are the ones heading out to engage with Dorwinion. Dorwinion going after the Belagaya footmen in overwhelming numbers, which obviously that's going to go Dorwinion's way if Numenor continue to push out. But from the front, the fact that you can now crack through those walls is going to be quite interesting, actually, because that will definitely... Oh, there's some Mithrandir's retinue. I missed that cavalry unit, but definitely now there's going to be more of an opportunity from the front. This was a real meat grinder for the attackers in the past. Like, you could break through this one section of wall here, but other than that it was just the 2 gates. Now though there's going to be a little bit more. They're still close together, all of these chokes, but more of an opportunity for the attackers to make something happen here. Mithrandir's retinue charging into the bandits, getting some good damage done, but the Ents are there, and some javelins also finding their marks, but the Mithrandir's retinue are a very tanky unit of cavalry. There goes another section of wall. So with this in mind, the attackers should be able to put more pressure on from the front here. Which, even if Dale do end up getting slaughtered up on these walls, shouldn't prove to be too decisive in this battle as it could be. Umbar, meanwhile, maybe a little bit slow to react here. I mean, Dale do have a bit of an opportunity to establish more of a beachhead here on the front line now. The Umbar seem content to allow them in. Lake Town Pikemen going to try and get into a position. The Barding Herd also moving in. Goodness me, this announcer really loves the sound of his own voice. Narun Arurorgard shooting in, who of course will be able to slaughter the Lake Town Pikemen en masse, to the extent that they're already routing in fact. So shooting right on through. And Dale had maybe a bit of an opportunity there if they had enough infantry to really establish that beachhead I was talking about, but they don't really have that anymore. The volleys coming in now are squeezing in with their infantry. Dismounted Earls of Dale. Victory seems certain. I somewhat doubt it. Alcarondas Legion are really rolling you over. Dalian Spearmen, of course, as well. Not going to be a match for the heavy Umbar infantry in close melee, especially not when they're really backs to the wall like this. What do we got here? Elvelyn, Vanguard, Dorwinion thinking about mounting the walls as well. I think that the more cautious approach that Dorwinion is taking is the right way to do this, by the way, but seeing as Dale are actually launching a full assault, there is some wisdom to be held that maybe Dorwinion should be doing the same, just so there's uniformity in how the attackers are approaching this and they try to put as much pressure on every angle as they possibly can. I mean, to be fair, they've killed those Belagaya footmen, so Dorwinion have started off this battle quite well. Dale are in a bit of a sticky spot from the front here. The Hobbit folk already moving in through. I mean, so all of these choke points that have been punched in to Osgiliath have convinced the defenders to actually pull back. Normally we see these 2 streets the epicenter of the battle, really. That's not going to be the case this time around, though. Belagaya footmen, Jesus Christ, this announcer. If he could shut the hell up, that would be really nice. Belagaya footmen, though, they have been left behind, so the Numenor player, his reaction's not quick enough here. Poor battlefield awareness, and this, again, another unit of Belagaya footmen is going to be swallowed whole by the attackers here. Right, I think this battle is finally the one that convinces me to finally go into the files and turn the announcers off, because bloody hell. Yeah, you can see the defenders having to reorganise their army here. The Belagaya footmen will buy time, but not that much time, and they're going to have to completely reorganise their defence here, because if they... I mean, they're going to need to hold this road, otherwise the defence against Dorwinion is going to be completely exposed to a rear charge from Arthedain and the Hobbits, so this defence, clearly, not enjoying its time on the battlefield so far. This really is the only... You already had control of the castle, you tool. But yeah, as I said, like, really this is the only front that the defenders are really dominant on so far against Dale, and even Dale are putting on some decent pressure. I mean, they're going to take losses by doing this, but it is going to force Umbar into committing maybe more resources than they would like. Corsair fencers are there, Blackguard, so the Corsair crossbows are shooting in there, and against Earls and Swordmasters, those are good enough targets to use crossbows on, especially with such a good target on them. Barding Herd pushing in through the gates. A Dunheim Shield Guard. Yeah, I mean, Umbar are going to have no real issues holding back Dale as long as they can focus fully on Dale. The problem is, Umbar may not have the luxury of doing that. Their allies are under a lot of pressure at this point. The Dorwinion player could start to slowly push in. On the front as well, Gondor are really fighting hard, but I do feel as though Umbar are going to maybe could fall into the trap here of being quite comfortable in their engagement against Dale and not sending over any support to their allies Numenor and Gondor, even if they really need it. And I hope that the Camping Panda doesn't live up to his namesake there and just pitches his tent in one section of the map, because that could prove to be disastrous for the defenders. Already you can see the Athelian Rangers are under fire, Y2K86 trying to scramble really to form a cohesive defence. With the Ents all up in his business, that's going to be fairly difficult, but Gondor do have the tools to deal with that. They've got the Nimlothians in here, they've got a lot of armour-piercing units in general on the front line, which is going to be good against the Numenorian Spears of Emenduit. What on earth was that? Was that the defend? It was the defending artillery. So the trebuchet there, hitting centre mass of all the Arthedain units, but the Ents are still going to be able to filter through. I mean, this should really be the end of the Ents when you think about it, but they are going to be able to make it to the trebuchet crew. And most of these units back here that are defending the trebuchet are actually just archers and pikemen, which are not going to be very good against Ents at all. Most of the strength was already committed to the front line, and you can see over here, Arthedain and Gondor's armour do blend together somewhat, but part of the problem here is just going to be sheer numbers. Gondor needs more numbers on this front line. The Fountain Guard are coming across. Numenorian Shield Guard are here. See, this now is the opportunity to commit fully if you're Dorwinion. Because even though there's still a lot of strength over here, you will kind of be safe in the knowledge that there isn't really going to be any reinforcements heading over to this section of the city because of how chaotic the fight in the middle is. Like, that's going to be where the defenders' focus is. And you can actually tell that here immediately because the Seafarers of Nindamos are engaged in a really not a very cost-effective fight at all against cheaper javelins than themselves. Seafarers are falling by the wayside there. But yeah, Dorwinion has got the opportunity to be aggressive here if they so choose. And let's hope they take that. The Ents, meanwhile, still getting up in the business of the defenders over here. Y2K really taking on most of the responsibility for this front line himself. I'd like to meet the guy who voiced this announcer and strangle him. Meanwhile, Ents, only 2 of them left, so the Gondorian armour piercing is having a good impact. The Gondorian cavalry as well, so Y2K, in spite of the fact that his allies, Numenor just through being slow and Umbar through being a little bit too comfortable up in the north, Gondor's done a pretty good job, I think, here. Meanwhile, here, on the front against Dale, Lake Town Infantry is over here, routing Swordmasters. Yeah, see these units back here now, yeah, of course their Blackguards are heading across. So better late than never for Umbar. They are now sending back some reinforcements, because Dale at this point, they're bottled up. Like, Umbar don't need their full army over here anymore to be able to hold on to this. Like, if civilians throwing themselves against Alcarondas Legion is the point that Dale are at, you're fairly safe in the knowledge that your defence is going to hold, to be honest with you. So sending across even stuff like these Balakith Axe Guard against some of the more heavy-duty units like the Ents would be probably a pretty good thing. Shield Bearers as well could be a good choice to send back there. But yeah, a fairly comfortable victory in the end from Umbar, and now all that remains is for him to go to reinforce his ally on the front. Because still these Ents are running around in the back line, and I do, like, this is the thing, like, even though Umbar have had a good victory here, I'm stopping short of offering universal praise, because for me, Gondor are having to shoulder a huge amount of the responsibility for the defence at this point. You can see there those Athelian, well, it's actually a Dunaim Shadow Bows that are doing some good, so Numenor getting their rangers into a good position. Castamir's rangers are also over here, so Umbar do have a couple of units here, as well as Numenor reacting well now. Veterans of Osgiliath capable of defending themselves in melee, but they're not really an aggressive kind of unit. Warns of the White Tower on their way over. Bodyguard tier unit. Again, more defensive in nature, like the Ents, you really need to be... It's kind of beyond a joke at this point, isn't it? It's almost like the game can hear me getting more frustrated with it. Bloody announcers. Anyway. Numenorian cohort still on the walls. I still think that Dorwinion are not taking advantage of their siege towers as they should be. They're being a little bit too passive at this point for my liking. They started off, this was the right thing to do. As the battle has worn on, they needed to put pressure on the walls here for this to be worthwhile. And all of the good work in the middle, I mean, they are putting some pressure on the walls, but only through one. Gondorian general, I think, dying on the front line. Which again is another sign that Umbar need to send more reinforcements over here. They've got too many resources tied up in the north. Dale are dead food at this point. More of the Umbar higher tier troops need to be over here. Because Gondor, while they've done a good job at holding so far, at the end of the day it is going to be 3 armies against 1 for the most part in melee. And that is going to take its toll on the brave men whose city this is. Axon of Lasarnak here, the catapult, trying to do its thing, firing into those blobs, hitting some of the buildings first and foremost. You can actually see there as well that we're getting towards a more ruined version of Osgiliath as time goes along, as some of these buildings start to crumble. Abendim Spearmen on the front line, as well as the very tough and durable Nimlothians, of course, fighting alongside the Raven Helms and the Citadel Guard. But there's plenty more where that came from the attackers. They still have a lot of units back here, including some of their stronger units. The elves are starting to make their way to the front line as well, especially over here, the heavier Mirkwood units getting onto the front. Some Numenorians are over here now though. So Numenor have sent over some reinforcements to help plug the gaps, and stuff like the Numenorian Shield Guard and Cohort will be good on this front line to help break up this advance. Dorwinion though, it started off well for Dorwinion like I said, but now they're just filtering into this one choke point through the gate, which is disappointing to say the least. The elites are too far away for my liking as well. Like, I would have sent forward the Hammer Guard early in this fight because they're heavily armoured and shielded. So they're not going to be quite so susceptible to being focused down. They're going to be good in the heart of the engagements as well against more heavily armoured defenders. There's only 1 unit of Seafarers holding this gate at this point. And there are Nandor Glade Guard on the front line at least, so they're a little bit more damaging. Not the best in an attrition-y fight because they're not the most defensive unit in the world, but they should suffice. Vine Guard over here still... How many Umbar troops have actually come down here now? Of course, their crossbowmen are here. It seems harsh to be critical of how Umbar have decided to approach this, because Dale went all in, so Umbar had to do that in response as well. But I do feel as though it's been a little bit sluggish from Umbar. Like, more reinforcements are needed over here before Gondor fall, because if Gondor's front lines here fall in the streets, they're going to be in trouble, because all of a sudden you're going to have stuff like potentially Bjornings, which I think are probably still alive. I mean, they shouldn't have been committed at this point. Yeah, they're still there. If you have the Bjornings just running all over the streets, if you have elves starting to take up positions where you can't really contain them anymore, pikes starting to shore things up, you're in massive trouble. Which is part of the reason why I'm still not convinced by this defence. Gondor are doing a good job, but this has a shelf life to it. You can see the pebbles there of the long bottom mob being flung into the backlines against the archers to try and prevent some of that DPS coming in, and now with more and more of Mirkwood's elves on the front line. Indeed he does. But now with Mirkwood on the front line, suddenly the quality is not so heavily in Gondor's favour, and the numbers still most certainly are not. There goes the Dalian general. Dale, who have been incredibly aggressive in this fight. God, this guy has the longest lines as well as being the most incessantly annoying with how often he says them. But yeah, the Dalian, I mean, the cavalry got pretty far into the settlement, to be fair to Dale. But ultimately, by the time they got to the archers, they were hunted down by the retinue, and there's still pikes over here. Pretty brutal catapult volley there, however, into the Belagar pikes that are in reserve. Still on the front line, you can see the flash of the elven swords. But still the Gondorian line holds, and this is good because now, with Dale pretty much entirely gone, Umbar now has no excuse to dither in the north anymore, and can now reinforce. Are you serious? The enemy are at the gates. Keldon Patrol are knocking down this gate, but I think that ship has somewhat sailed, don't you? Victory seems certain for the Elvelyn infantry, so again, a matter of numbers and the more damaging units that they have in reserve over here. But the Numenorians will hold. I mean, with the armour piercing on those spears as well, the Elvelyn infantry are not going to be having a good time in melee here against the Numenorians. It's definitely going to be solid on that front line. More artillery. Oof, that's really brutal as well. Those trebuchet volleys have once again restabilise the Gondorian line, and all of the Hobbits and Elves that have been fighting on the front line, which looked like they were gaining the upper hand for a little while there, going to be slapped back down. Hiriouth, Woodland Realm Axeman also moving forwards. Fountain Guard, victory seems certain. So yeah, the Gondorians clearly, I mean, once again, in lieu of the tier list I did. Oh my god. Please, please shut up. Please be quiet. Meanwhile, in lieu of that tier list, the Gondorians once again proving themselves to be absolutely fantastic at holding a line. Disciplined men indeed, especially in the face of such varied opponents. Arthedain, the Hobbits, and Mirkwood all bring very different strengths to the field. Gondor have been equal to all of them so far, though. And with the reinforcement, I mean, to be fair, that artillery has definitely really done some heavy lifting as well. In come the Bjornings, though, finding a gap. Have the opportunity here alongside the Woodland Realm Axemen, getting in and amongst those blackguards. Now could be the opportunity for the attackers to really make something happen. With the Bjornings running around in the back line in particular, that's going to be a real problem. Like, the Mithrandir's retinue can try and bog them down for a little while, but the Bjornings will rip them to bits in melee. And with Elves also getting in and amongst the back line, I mean, now the Bjornings could get over here and help Dorwinion gain access into the town, and with what they have left, they can then try to systematically take the streets. There goes the final gatehouse, which hopefully heralds a new era where this guy keeps his mouth shut. Perhaps I'm hoping for too much there. Victory seems certain for the Numenorian Shield Guard, which surprises me considering they're shaken, horribly outnumbered and getting hacked to pieces by Elven Glaives. But there we go. Ooh, hello. And Dorwinion are able to pour in over here, though. I mean, they're going to get shot point blank by the Narin Arrow Roar Guard, and Nandor Glade Guard are really bad under arrow fire. They've got very light armour indeed. Really good on the charge, but not good at taking hits from range at all. Bjornings are here, but now the Dorwinion Cavalry also in here, but the Dorwinion Cavalry getting a little bit close for comfort there against the Belagire Pikes. But those poison arrows finding their marks. Getting some good kills there. Woodland Realm Axemen pouring in, so it was looking pretty dicey for the attackers for a while there, but decisive action from the Bjornings and from the Mirkwood Axemen from Infinity 7 have managed to give them a really nice foothold here to try and springboard into the rest of the settlement now, which again is a sign that the Umbar reinforcements were lagging a little bit too far away, because with some Umbar reinforcements over here that probably wouldn't have happened. Blackguards are over here now, throwing their javelins. A unit of Balakith Axguard coming in as well. Very chaotic though, missiles flying all over the place. Corsair Fencers trying to hold on as well, but they're being engaged by a unit of Arthedain men-at-arms to prevent them from returning some cohesion to this line. In come the Axemen to try and help out. A really unified javelin volley there, which is fairly rare. These Woodland Realm Axemen are ultimately going to get javelin to death though, if this one isn't able to help them fight through these Axemen more quickly. Morroquendi Stalkers kiting this one unit of pikes to death, which isn't the worst use of their ammo, to be honest with you. Pikes, as the battle goes on, could prove to be an incredibly valuable resource indeed. Dorwinion, though, still struggling to smash their way through this line, and they're doing that age-old bugbear of mine, where their elite units are way too far away from the front. If they had the Hammer Guard on the front line here, these Numenorians would already be gone, and Dorwinion would be marching through the streets alongside their allies, and with that sort of coordination, the defenders would be in real trouble. Over here, though, unsurprisingly, because the Umbar reinforcements arrived a little bit sooner, the defenders are still quite dominant down this street. And of course the attackers need to keep sending men to feed this assault, otherwise all these men will then turn around and hold the other street instead. So Mirkwood, Hiri Peng on the front line, Arthedain marks, and you can see that over here is less of a concern for them, because a lot of it is archers that are out of ammo. In comes the unit of Arthedain pikemen as well. Less missiles in play now than there was at the start of the game. So that phalanx could prove to be very useful, especially for keeping this assault going for just that little bit longer. There's still the Proudfoot protectors as well. The Mirkwood catapult's still here. Warns of the North getting into a good position as well, up here on the walls. And armour-piercing arrows into that blob could be enough to turn that fight around as well. So the defenders at this point need to sort of reorganise, get themselves into a good place to stand once again. Defeat seems certain for the Fountain Guard. Corsairs. The Corsair Fencers as well. Hiripeng firing in. So as the battle has gone on, the attackers have managed to get more and more of a handle on the situation. You can see here the Nandor Glade Guard. They took so many losses on the advance that the charge was never really going to bother the Numenor Royal Guard. They have taken some losses, of course, as you would expect when an armour-piercing infantry unit goes up against a heavy spearman, but the Numenor Royal Guard enough in the end to take them out. Some Corsair Fencers over here as well. Except that there's still Morroquendi Stalkers still firing into these units that are sort of flailing about trying to deal with them. Ingo the Numenorian cohort firing in there to that unit up on the walls as well. What have we got here? Nandor Glade Guard moving in, another unit. Still it's... well, in come the Woodland Realm Axemen actually to try and help force Dorwinion into the settlement. But another surround, so a counter surround. Numenor still not allowing Dorwinion to get into the settlement alongside their allies. They will eventually, of course, but the longer they can keep Dorwinion outside the walls, the longer Dorwinion refuse to use the siege towers that they set up, the more likely it is that the attackers will take grievous losses over here in the middle. Numenor Sentinels getting into position, but not a particularly organised one. Javelins being thrown at point blank into the blob. Combination of man-at-arms and axemen making up the vast majority of this push at this point. I mean, the attackers are running out of steam over here, you have to say. They're shaken. And it was an impressive push, but I think the defenders have managed to weather the storm. More units over here, of course, for the attackers. Pikes on the front line. Defensive line looking a little bit thin. Armour-piercing arrows finding their mark into the Alcarondas Legion. Just got to establish dominance, just talk right over him. Veterans Osgiliath firing away, but yeah, those armour-piercing arrows should do some pretty good damage to whatever unit they fire into, and they've got a clear shot here into the Alcarondas Legion. And then, of course, in melee, they could be absolutely vital as well at this point. I think the early demise of Dale did hurt the attackers' chances in this battle, but the middle players honestly handled things pretty well. I think the only player... well, I think that Dorwinion has dithered just a little bit too long. There's no way that Numenor should still be holding Dorwinion outside the gates, outside the walls at this point. It's taken far too long for Dorwinion to get in. High quality faction or no, Dorwinion definitely had the tools to get through this quicker. And they funneled into one gatehouse and played into the defenders' hands, unfortunately. Corsair Fencers getting engaged by the Morroquendi Stalkers. Don't want to stay there for too long, otherwise those rapiers will reap a pretty heavy toll on them. What have we got going on over here? Dunedain Peacekeepers trying to head over here to finally try and babysit Dorwinion within the settlement. Numenorian cohort against Dunedain Peacekeepers. Interesting battle that. I mean, it says the Peacekeepers are going to win that actually, which surprises me. I think of the two, the cohort are the superior unit. And I think now, yeah, I mean, the interesting fight though. I mean, it's not a huge difference. The cohort will definitely be bled for that, but more is going to be needed to help out Dorwinion there, I fear, if they want to get them inside the settlement more quickly. Peacekeepers are also on the front line over here, really putting pressure on the Numenor Sentinels. Sheer weight of numbers is pushing them back, and the Phalanx not doing so well as a result. Trying to help hold the line as well. We've got the Balakathak's Guard, still the Arthedain Man-at-Arms, there's still a few archers, but you can really tell. I mean, I do think this is the last hurrah of the attackers over here. I mean, they have a few units out here. They have the Dismounted Knights of Numenor, they have the Warns of the North. That's pretty much all they have left to commit. The rest of the units are already in here. There's still a few pikes moving around, but when you consider the fact there's still Pharazim Swordmasters in the way, those shadow bows are probably out of ammunition, because we did see them shooting way earlier in the battle as well. But yeah, Pharazim Swordmasters here on the front line, going to be doing the business. There are Proudfoot Protectors though. I mean, there's a lot of pikes here, which could be the saving grace. It'll take the pikes a long time to kill the Pharazim Swordmaster. They're actually taking shots from the Warns of the North as well, so maybe the attackers do have things in hand over here. Again, I feel as if Dorwinion, if they had got into the settlement sooner, I think the attackers would be... the momentum would be well and truly with them, but the fact that they've taken so long to get in... There's still Blackshot Dragon Slayers as well, so technically Dale is still a factor here with probably their most significant unit. Here come some Fencers and the Camping Pounder. I'd probably save those Fencers, to be honest with you. This part of the city now is finally lost once and for all. Still the Numenorians refusing to give up, fighting back to back. Dunedain Peacekeepers from the rear, the main body of the Dorwinion army from the front. Yeah, Dorwinion has been a little bit too static and slow for my liking, but at the very least in the late game they do still have access to their elites, which may very well be very necessary to bring down stuff like the Harbingers of Castamere, the Pharazim Swordmasters and the Royal Legion. Arthedain Men-at-Arms broken, so the defenders are going to be victorious over here, but they're going to need to turn around pretty quickly and deal with that assault, or form up a new line to deal with Dorwinion's advance. One of the two needs to happen, and it needs to happen quickly. A lot of armour piercing on the front line. Not so good against the remaining Mirkwood troops, but they just need manpower here to finish off this assault. And then they can think about how best to approach the situation. Fencers and blackguards dealing with what little is left of the long bottom mob. The Arthedain Rangers still have ammo, which again is another really significant development. It means they're going to be able to shoot into the back of this assault over here. Pharazim Swordmasters a little bit scattered at this point. They're strong enough that it won't be maybe too much of an issue. In come the dismounted Knights of Numenor. You can see there the Warns of the North pulling out their blades as well, potentially going to sally forth into melee. These Pharazim Swordmasters though, 2 units of them, the healthier unit over here as well. I mean, definitely the Dorwinion support is going to need to get here sooner rather than later. Naren Iron Royal Guard, there's still the Royal Legion. If the defenders are going to win this, it will be on the back of their remaining quality, I think. The Rangers still doing their damage as well. The Dorwinion hasn't been decisive enough. I've mentioned that a lot. I feel as though it's pretty harsh on the Dorwinion player, but haven't been decisive enough throughout this battle, and that could cost his team here, because I think the attackers from the front were decisive. They did everything they needed to. They were always going to take horrendous losses through here, but they did well, all things considered. I think the sneaking suspicion I have, well, there goes the Umbar General near the stairs of this building over here, but the sneaking suspicion I had is at the start of the battle I mentioned how important this outer battle would be, and how Dale and Dorwinion's roles would be fairly decisive. Dale got slaughtered very early and completely by Umbar. Dorwinion have been too slow and dawdled throughout the entire battle, and as a result, that if the defenders go on to win this battle, I think that will be the reason why. Of course, our crossbows firing in, drawing off the Proudfoot Protectors, whose presence on the front line, being shielded pikemen, could have been so, well, was being so useful. Now is a bit of a rear charge. Arthedain Rangers out of ammunition, so they're getting a bit of a, what is technically a hammer and anvil charge. They're at least surrounding this front line force. Still no sign of Dorwinion, you have to say. Woodland Realm Axemen are on the way. Nandor Glade Guard finally on the way over. Morroquendi Bows, like, this is what I'm talking about. Like, they're shooting into these very depleted units, wasting their time, essentially. Playing with their food somewhat. Dealing with these units that are still left behind with stuff like Glade Masters. Blackshot Dragon Slayers are guilty of that as well, to be fair. The one remaining Dalian unit is a significant one. But their allies are getting butchered on the front line, and they're not showing the kind of urgency that you need. Pharazim Swordmasters now getting a surround off here, and the dismounted Knights of Illuminus are very tanky, but they're not going to be tanky enough to weather this particular storm, and I think the defenders here have seized the momentum of this battle, and I don't see how the attackers can claim it back. It was a bold push through the middle, which was looking like it was going to destabilise the defenders for a little while there, but they reacted very well to it, to be fair. At this point there's not a great deal of Gondor left. They were the ones that were front and centre, much like in the last battle we saw when these three armies fought. Only on that occasion Numenor and Umbar weren't quite able to get the defenders over the line. On this occasion I think they probably will, based on what we've seen up until this point. Proudfoot Protectors, not many of them left. I say that, there's still a decent amount of them left, poking and prodding away at the Harbingers over here. But across come the Axemen, which should be able to surround them and do the business. The armour piercing, I mean, this is what constitutes a heavily armoured unit for the Hobbits, just a basic chain shirt. And those rather interesting helmets. Look almost like World War I helmets. There goes Sam. That would be a rather unfortunate end to the movie, wouldn't it, if Sam was just bisected by a big two-handed axe. Kind of goes against the messages of the film, I suppose. What have we got over here? So also Numenor finishing off what little remains of the skirmishers that were over here. There goes Thranduil. Run through by a pike. Backshot Dragon Slayers. marching along. Morkwendi Bow is going to get into position to presumably fire. I don't think the poison arrows are going to be that important against all of these bodyguard tier units. A lot of that ammunition is also unfortunately being buried into the trebuchets. The trebuchet carcasses. So again, comedy of errors really. And now Umbar blocking the Dorwinion advance. And will Dorwinion go all in here? They kind of need to, because these Nandor Glade Guard alone won't be enough to overcome the Umbar infantry. Finally we're going to see the elites in action for Dorwinion. The Elvel and Hammer Guard are going to come forward. And their armour piercing should be enough to make this a more interesting fight, if nothing else. Especially seeing as the Harbingers of Castamere have already been in combat and seen a bit of damage done to them. Over here, Pharazim Swordmasters, victory seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle, apparently. Oh, those are ranger shots there. The Adunheim Shadow Bows revealing they do still have a bit of ammo, but they too are hitting the trebuchet carcasses. So neither side really hitting too many of their shots, if we're being honest. Some of them are creeping through the gap, but tisk tisk. Royal Legion of Armenelos heading over here to help out the Umbar efforts against Dorwinion, and still Dorwinion here. I do hope that the message does sink in that being half-hearted with your committals in fights like this doesn't pay off. And I hope that this is a lesson that the Dorwinion player will learn. Don't be foolish like the Dalian player was early on, but when you do commit, you have to make sure you commit in numbers where you can, otherwise you're going to be subject to something like this. Like, it says they're going to win. That's not going to be true with the Royal Legion here, though. They now need to respond in kind by sending another unit over here, trying to sneak through this gap over here and get maybe a partial surround. And that would be the way, I think, for them to claim a bit of an advantage back in this fight. Because numbers-wise, Dorwinion have got enough here to be getting on with, I think. Pharazim Swordmasters charging forward, getting into the face of the Morkwendi Bows. There's still the black shots over here. The Alvalan infantry are going to head across to support. It's not ideal, because they're not going to be able to deal the damage to something like the Royal Legion, but at least it's something. Battlefield awareness there. Morkwendi Bows firing black shots, shooting directly into the Pharazim Swordmasters. So Numenor wanting to wipe Dale and Dorwinion from the face of the earth. There goes the Arthedain general. Warns of the North being overwhelmed. Black shots trying to move backwards so they can shoot as the Naranaru Sentinels come in from the side. May only be a unit of 17, but they're definitely going to be getting in the way of things here for Dorwinion, whose archer line is still operational, as well as Dale's. Those Nandor Glade Guard getting destroyed by the Pharazim Swordmasters. The Warns of the North broken at the loss of their general. And the Pharazim's taken damage, to be fair, on the front line, but still healthy enough that they're going to prove to be a real problem, you'd imagine. A unit which was languishing on the walls for far too long, really. The Morkwendi Glade Masters, as I said, playing with their food a little bit with their Corsair Fencer obsession, but now they're heading over here, and this is going to be interesting. With them and the Elvalan infantry and some Keldon River Patrol, suddenly Dorwinion should win over here. Should. Don't know what the River Patrol are going to do. If Dorwinion can be decisive here, they could go on to win this fight. The problem is, I just think that, based on what I've seen so far, I just think the defenders are going to be a little bit more organised. Having said that, the Numenor player has been the most sluggish of the defenders, so maybe. Also, javelins coming in here for the Pharazim Swordmasters, exactly what the Doctor ordered for the attackers. Meanwhile, over here, still kiting backwards with their skirmishers. I mean, based on what was left going into these final phases, I think I'd prefer to have been on the attacking side, because you have the tools to dictate the pace of the fight. But, having said that, I still think that the outright power of some of these units is going to be a problem. Like, the Pharazim Swordmasters are going to chase the Keldon River Patrol. A nice point-blank volley there into the Pharazim, doing some really nice damage, actually. These cheap javelins definitely earning their keep. And now the Elvalan infantry retreating off the front line to block the advance of the Pharazim Swordmasters to allow the javelins to escape. Unfortunately, that's going to leave them a little bit undermanned, perhaps, on the front line. Some more Naranaru Sentinels coming in, but the combination of Glade Masters and Hammer Guard actually proving to be a real problem. But the Athelian Rangers from Y2K Gondor may be heavily depleted, but what few units they do have at this point still doing their bit for the cause. Some pikes arriving on the front line as well. The Still this full strength unit essentially of Naru and Aru Royal Guard as well. Meanwhile, bit of a skirmish happening here in the square. Morroquendi bows going up against the Dunheim Shield Guard, the superior numbers of the Morroquendi, giving them the victory there. Just look at this though. Keldon River Patrol being passed by the Pharazim Swordmasters, and at this point, these units still have ammo. The Pharazim Swordmasters though will continue to chase them, chasing them further away from the main fight, which is happening near the centre. Blackshot Dragon Slayers maybe thinking about pulling out their swords and engaging. Slight numbers advantage there. Maybe they could engage and then shoot them in the back with the Morroquendi bows. Some manoeuvring would be required. 119 Keldon River Patrol. What is the meaning of this? That must be the units further in the settlement still. Oh, they're going to charge in. I mean, this could be interesting. This is actually maybe potentially a really good bit of teamwork between Dorwinion and Dale, because I think what they want to do is engage and then shoot from the wall with their armour-piercing arrows. The issue with doing that is, in order to do that, the Morroquendi bows needed to stay in melee with them, and unfortunately it looks as though they're going to run away from the Pharazim Swordmasters, which of course means that the Pharazim Swordmasters will be free to go up on top of the walls and engage the Blackshots in melee. So, very weird there indeed. We'll see what happens with them later on. Meanwhile, Dunheim Shadowbow still firing in. Naru and Aru Royal Guard from Numenor heading across here as well, going to chase off the Keldon River Patrol. And over here, it's looking like the addition of those Rangers has made the difference, because those Glade Masters have definitely taken some additional losses. The Javelins are going to try and do the same thing to the Defenders here. There's still the Harbingers, only 6 of them remaining. 48 of the Royal Legion. Hammerguard definitely taking a bit of a beating, so I think Gondor here deserves a lot of credit, even though they've got very limited resources left. And now the Keldon River Patrol being engaged in melee by the Naru and Aru Royal Guard. They might be out of ammo, to be fair, but obviously they're going to get hammered in melee by the Naru and Aru. And I think the attackers here are going to run out of steam still. A glimmer of hope perhaps in the late game, but as I kind of suspected, I think the defenders have got what it takes. This one unit of Pharazim Swordmasters has also managed to effectively chase off the Dragon Slayers and the Morroquendi bows from being near the front line, where they could have been really useful in support. And that's going to be a real issue, I think, because the Dragon Slayers could still be such a useful tool, and now the entire rest of the unit of the Pharazim Swordmasters is going to get back up on top of this wall. 26 of them remaining. Even with that, I think the Pharazim, even if they end up losing, there'll only be like 6 Dragon Slayers left alive, which is not going to be enough, of course. 54 Morroquendi bows, units scattered throughout the town. Over here on the front, Athelium Rangers are actually getting engaged by Keldon River Patrol at this point, preventing them from firing. Fighting in a little skirmish there, but I think the damage has already been done. You can see here the Royal Legion of Armenelos have seized the initiative in this fight, and they're not going to give it back now. And in terms of overall tankiness and skill, they're going to be stronger than the Albalin Hammerguard, even if they lack the AP. And with the support of some of these Umbar units around them, I think that's going to be all she wrote. Glade Masters overwhelmed on the front line as well. River Patrol trying their best, but ultimately Naru and Aru Royal Guard, they may not be multiple HP as they once were, but they're still an incredibly tanky spear unit when it comes to their melee combat. And that's something else to consider. Even if the Morroquendi bows find their way over here, a unit like this is going to be ideal for dealing with them. And there they go, Keldon River Patrol routing. And that's going to be the end of them. And you can also see the fact that there's more Bjornings dead on the floor. So the Bjornings caused a bit of havoc when they did seep through the lines, but maybe not to the extent that the attackers were hoping for there. Farmers of Buckland are going to charge in. They've got a pretty nasty charge on them with those big farming implements that they wield. It's not going to be enough here. At this point, it's going to be a case of search and destroy for the defenders as they finally claim victory over here, pretty much. Still 1 or 2 Nandor Glade Guards. Presumably that's 1 now. There he is, 1 Morroquendi Glade Master left alive. Not considered worth killing, apparently. They'll have to return for him though, if the Dorwinion player doesn't admit defeat. Such a unit is not going to rout off easily after all. A Dunheim Shadowbow's victory seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle. A amongst the carcasses of the trebuchets. And again, maybe if the Dorwinion player had not buried most of their ammo into the trebuchets as well, the extra damage they did could have proved to be fairly decisive in the end. It wasn't, of course. Pharazim Swordmasters actually retreated from the fight against the Dragon Slayers, leaving a few of them left alive. Morroquendi bows over here as well. I don't think it's going to matter too much. I think the numbers discrepancy at this point is simply too great. If they can somehow use more of their armor-piercing arrows, perhaps all hope is not lost, just most hope. What have we got over here? Another little skirmish. Elvalan infantry, which for some reason was way over here. But they may have routed and then come back, to be fair to them. But they have been discovered. Of course, they're going to get absolutely dumpstered by Royal Legion of Armenelos and the Naru Na'aru Royal Guard. And I think as the fight has gone on, definitely the quality has made itself apparent. I think I'd still give the MVP in this fight to Gondor, though. Just because with what little they had, they were really useful in the late game, and the way that they held those lines, which was definitely where things could have gone wrong for the defenders, was very impressive. I think Umbar and Numenor just a little bit slower. They still did well, though, to be fair. I mean, I'm really nitpicking here. But still, I think Gondor does deserve just a little bit of extra credit. And I'm kind of struggling to see how there's so long left in this battle. I mean, I assume that what the defenders are going to do is regroup as soon as they're finished over here, and then move in to destroy the Dragon Slayers, probably. The balance of power is still reasonably even, but the problem the Dragon Slayers are going to have is there's simply too many to kill, I think. Some Athenian Rangers over here, so still the Gondorians either get just a few more kills with their Rangers. I mean, they're going to get skirmished down here by the Morroquendi Bowmen. Any additional kills they get here would... Ooh, they're actually going to go after the Numenorian player there. Numenor, once again, proving to just be a little bit slow on the uptake. In a different situation, that would probably cost them the game. I think in this case they built up enough of a safety net. In fact, I think we're going to go up to ×2 speed here, because it's probably going to be a lot of dancing around one another before they inevitably... Yeah, like, look at this. Understandable, I suppose, but it looks fairly ridiculous. If you've dug yourself into this kind of position as the attackers, in my opinion, you shouldn't try and dance and skirmish the enemy to death. You should at least have the good grace to make it a genuine fight, because it's your fault you're in this position in the first place. As the attackers, where you outnumber the defenders like this, you really have no excuse to not win the fight straight up. You shouldn't have to kite. Especially not for Dorwinion and Dale, who I think there's a lot of room for improvement with the way that they approach this battle, as I think has been quite clear as the battle's gone on. Royal Legion of Armenelos, obviously the Black Shots, must be out of ammunition at this point if this is the avenue they've decided to take. The Dunheim Shadow Bows firing in. Morroquendi Bows not going to last too much longer. There's still one Glade Master somewhere. Still the Athenian Rangers moving in as well. Not much though, I mean, yeah, like 2% the differential here. So it was a very close battle. And if one side, you know, if the attackers were a little less sluggish, or if the defenders were a little more sluggish than they were, that could have made all the difference here in this case, I think. But in the end, the Numenorians, in whatever dastardly deeds they were thinking of doing within Osgiliath, are going to be free to do so now. The assault to try and take their city from them has failed. That much is clear. We've got over there one Keldon River Patrol. Probably the general is over here somewhere. What's going on out here? Oh, I see. One's in the north of routing. I assume the Glade Master has also been defeated by something. A few units still over here. Routing Axe Guard. Well, regardless, what have we here? 4 Morroquendi Bows, Corsair Blackguard. There's still 1 Harbinger in there, 5 Harbingers actually, which is surprising considering the level of pressure they were put on earlier on in this game. Let's see here. Blackshot Dragon Slayer is going to be the last unit left alive by the looks of things for the attackers, which is surprising considering how quickly the main body of Dale's army was ultimately thrown back by Umbar. But it does look as though they are going to be the last ones left standing. With their big old swords. The Arthedain Rangers continuing to fire into their backs. I think this is the only thing Gondor have left that isn't perpetually routing in the town centre. You have to say it's mostly Numenor that are left alive as well. Like Umbar have got a little bit, but not much. They've got some sentinels, some harbingers, and some blackguards. But definitely the main bulk of it is going to be Numenorian units. To be fair, the Blackshots are putting up a decent fight here as well. Victory seems certain even. I don't think that's entirely accurate. I think that the man count is really going to work against them in the end. But I mean, Blackshots in melee should be good against Nara and Reforged, which is definitely proving to be the case. There's also the additional little shots they're taking from the Arthedain Rangers, which not going to last any longer. Gondor will probably play no further part in this battle unless they manage to wriggle away. That's pretty key actually, because it means the Blackshots, who were actually winning on that front line, have pulled back, and now they're going to have to go back, and they took crippling losses by doing that. They were still going to lose, of course. Honestly, I would have just tanked those ranger shots. Like, they're not actually doing that much damage with only 3 of them there. And they're actually getting some friendly fire as well. It wouldn't have made the difference between victory and defeat on this occasion, though, for Jev, like, to be fair. Here are the Harbingers. They're going to get the full surround. Charging in there. Definitely proving to be a resilient, a very tough cookie in melee, though, here. Blackshots. I'm still not entirely convinced about the way the Blackshots look, to be honest with you. I think I've never really offered my opinion on what they're all about. I think the idea of a handheld wind lance as they have is really cool. And the idea of the unit in general is cool. I don't like their swords, though. I will be honest about that. I do not. Maybe that's a bit hypocritical of me, because I did use the similar style sword in Dark Souls 1 for a decent amount of my first playthrough, but not for me. Not in this particular setting. I can understand why it is how it is. Being a Dragon Slayer, you need a big weapon, but
if we remain true and wholehearted, victory will be ours.
Indeed. Axe Guard coming forwards. The 2 remaining Axe Guard in that unit. There's still 1 over here as well. I don't know how long he's going to last. No, he's going to get run through. And we're within 1% actually, so the Blackshots and the Mirkwood bows able to bring back a further percent. It's not going to be enough though. But they're actually routing, are they? They are. So that means that would... presumably there is still something else left alive then. What is it? It's not that. Gondor Glade Guard? No, nothing. What's going on over here? Oh, 10 Farmers of Buckland, really? Dale, I assume he's definitely going to admit defeat. And that's going to bring this battle, I should say, to a close. 1% the difference. A very competitive game indeed. In spite of some of the, what I would call less than optimal plays, I would say both teams, there was maybe things they did right and wrong. Umbar got a lot of kills, but I feel as though that was more down to the fact that Dale sort of launched an almost suicidal charge on the walls too early. And that definitely helped pad out the kill count just a little bit from Umbar. I would give, personally, in spite of the large kill discrepancy, I would still give the MVP to Gondor. Just because their ability to hold down the middle was absolutely vital to the victory here. Absolutely. Like, if they hadn't been able to do that, this would have been a loss for the defenders, which I think is the key. I think Umbar and Numenor did very well, but they went more through the motions than Gondor did. That's just my opinion, though. I still think Umbar and Numenor played very well. The attackers, I think Dale and Dorwinion, like I said, I do think it was this side of the river, the attacks that happened over the walls, that were fairly key. The middle actually went better than I expected for the attackers early on, mainly because I didn't know you could now punch holes through the wall that had the archers over it, which gives you a little bit more agency through there. And I think the Hobbits, Arthedain and Mirkwood performed better in this battle than I expected them to. On the outer walls, however, Dale and Dorwinion needed to do a little bit better, I think. Dorwinion needed to be much faster than they were, as I said, throughout the battle. Dale needed to wait just a little bit longer before they launched an assault of that scale on Umbar, because I think that could have made the difference there. But in the end, when you've got a 1% differential, it's always going to be fairly close. Let's see what did the damage for Umbar. I'd imagine, yeah, Castamir's Rangers breaking 1,000 kills on one of those blobs on the front line, which, when it comes to Rangers, like, you kind of expect something like that in a battle like this if you can get them into a good position. So obviously, whenever you see the over 1,000 kills mark, it's always quite impressive. Harbingers did very well in the late game when they were up against primarily stronger units, actually, so it does go to show their quality. Nara and Irish Sentinels as well, those pikes obviously very good on the front line. Several units breaking 100, crossbows, blackguards with their armour-piercing missiles. Alcarondas Legion proving themselves to be the ever-reliable stalwart for Umbar that they are. Really, really good on the front line across all theatres in this war. Balakith Axguard. Shield Bearers didn't do that well. Like, again, this kind of cements my opinion on the Shield Bearers. Like, they're okay for what they are, but I mean, if you want armor piercing, you go for the Axe Guard. If you want a shielded infantry, you go for the Alcarondas Legion. Still, for me, in spite of the fact they have been made a little bit better by the patch, I just don't think the Shield Bearers are... Well, we'll save that for the inevitable Umbar tier list, whenever that may be. Adunheim Shield Guard, good for holding the line. Balakith Axe Guard, good for that additional spike of AP damage, but a lot of damage obviously centred around the Rangers, and then other than that, lots of units breaking 100 and 200 kills for the Camping Panda. Big thank you to him as well for sending me this battle replay. It's always good to see a siege that is this close on a nice iconic map like Osgiliath. Big thank you to all of the players involved as well. There are names that I recognise and names that I don't actually. Numenor, Dale and Dorwinion are players that I don't believe I recognise. Maybe Beastie I've seen before, but not the other two. But other than that, obviously players that I have very much seen before. So yeah, very good battle indeed. What's next? I'm not sure. Honestly, like I said, like in the 5,000 sub Q&A, I'm kind of a bit sporadic with how I run things, which is probably to the overall detriment of my channel, to be honest with you. If I was a little bit more organised, things would probably be a little bit more advanced than they currently are. But I think it kind of depends on a couple of things. But I mean, obviously the regular schedule will still be plodding along as it is. Next could be another tier list. There will obviously be a battle in the very near future as well. Probably another a larger scale Reforged battle, because I do have a few more that I want to get through before they pass their sell-by date, so to speak. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.